Hello class, I bring to you my presentation on domestic violence from yours truly, Tiana+Corpuz. Okay, let's see what we have here. In this presentation, I'll explain to you guys what exactly is domestic violence, who it may affect, the myths and dangers of domestic violence, why it is important to be aware of domestic violence, where domestic violence starts, meaning the truth, the answer, or the reason. Also, what you can do to stop the violence, both personally and on a social level. And I will also brief you guys on the cycle of violence. Additionally, I will talk about some sociological theories and concepts. From this presentation, I hope to instill the underlying truth of domestic violence and make this social issue known. Here are some short, quick facts about domestic violence. Domestic violence is a type of behavior to try and control another person. Domestic violence also includes emotional and psychological abuse. Domestic violence is not a personal problem but rather a public issue. It is a public issue because it affects the larger society. Domestic violence happens to everyone, no matter of gender, race, age, or culture. Domestic violence can also be a health problem. Here are a few statistics about domestic violence in Hawaii. In 2005, 16% of murders were related to domestic violence. Another statistic from 2006 was that in one day, 96 domestic violence victims found refuge in emergency shelters. The next year, 2007, just in one day, 110 domestic violence victims found refuge in emergency shelters. Now, just last year, 2012, in one day, there were 176 domestic violence victims taking refuge in emergency shelters. As you can see that the numbers are rising in Hawaii, which is very unfortunate. Nationally, the statistics are that 1 in every 4 women experiences domestic violence in her lifetime. Another statistic is 85% of women are victims of domestic violence. Most cases of domestic violence are never reported to the police. Less than 1/5 of victims who report injury from their intimate partner seek medical treatment. From these statistics, both state and nationwide, you can see that domestic violence is very real and is escalating. More about domestic violence. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is an abusive act of various forms to gain control of another person. Domestic violence is hard to eliminate because it is a vicious cycle. The act of domestic violence consists of assault. Domestic violence may include physical, sexual, emotional, financial, intimidation, using children, and isolation to maintain their power of control and dominance. Domestic violence can be perpetrated by both males and females, but majority of the batters are males. Domestic violence is also a health problem because of the physical abuse, but mostly the emotional drainage. Being mentally tired creates a poor health lifestyle, gives you stress, post-traumatic stress, and some other psychological illnesses. It is also a health problem for your children as well because they too can become victims as well as have behavioral problems. They can become timid or it may lead them to be more aggressive. Domestic violence will occur more often if nothing is done to stop it, and it will become more intense. Who is affected by domestic violence? Domestic violence affects everyone. Everyone includes the family of the batterer and the victim, children, family, siblings, co-workers, neighbors, and the community. When the children witness the assault, they are learning that it is okay to hurt people. They are also affected emotionally, which causes them to have behavioral problems. It puts a lot of stress on your child to endure that pain of seeing their mother get abused, and the fear you create in them of not having a safe home. Even the economy is affected because of the medical treatments provided for victims that seek help, including therapy and shelters. It costs a lot to train a person to be a professional in handling domestic violence cases and calls. Here are some myths about domestic violence. There are many, but I listed a few. The myths are just an excuse of why domestic violence occurs. One of the biggest myths is that the victim did something to provoke the abuser to cause violence. No matter how provoked someone is, to inflict pain, there is no excuse. You are putting blame on the victim, which relieves the trouble for the batterer for their actions. It will also make the batterer feel like it is okay to do it again, because it was not their fault and they did not get into trouble. Another reason why victims do not come out for help is because they think it was their fault. It is no one's fault except the abuser. Domestic violence is not hereditary. It is learned through past experiences or from witnessing it. The myth that contains the use of alcohol does not cause physical abuse. It may be a factor, but not the reason. That right there is another example of excuse to put the blame on something else instead of the batterer. Another myth is that domestic violence only happens once in a relationship and it will get better. Domestic violence is a cycle. It will never be stopped unless both parties get professional help. After the first time, the second time gets easier for the batterer to gain control and power. Another big myth that people do not understand is that it is not so easy for a victim to just walk away. It is known that the most dangerous part is trying to escape from the batterer. Fear and many factors go into play on why the victim will have a hard time leaving. The batterer will give guilt trips, intimidation, and make the victim feel insecure. Myths are not right because it leads to the wrong assumptions. And instead of figuring out what was the real reason why it occurred, they make excuses. Lies are learned on each myth how to cover up domestic violence over and over, and it needs to stop. This slide, we have the dangers of domestic violence. Domestic violence is very dangerous. It will never be stopped unless both parties receive or retreat for help. The victim will have to be strong to not give in to their partner or abuser and get out of the harmful environment, be a physician, commit to surrounding themselves with positive people, and seek help for the children as well. The batterer will have to seek help because unless they suppress, pick classes, find another way to relinquish anger, they are not safe from themselves as well as people they come in contact with. Domestic violence is unpredictable, in a way, because you never know when the last assault might really be the last. Myths are dangerous as well because it is an excuse to hide the underlying truth of domestic violence. It is also dangerous because you never know when the next assault may happen, and one day it may be too late because you covered it up with excuses. Myths are also a danger to younger generations because it teaches them that they can get away with it or be taught to accept these myths. It will mold their minds in the wrong way for understanding the actual issue to why an assault occurred. Why is domestic violence important? It is important to be aware of domestic violence because you can help save someone or help yourself in this kind of situation. Understanding that domestic violence happens in many forms and you may be a victim of the batterer. Either way, even knowing about domestic violence will open your eyes. Being aware of domestic violence can save many lives. Domestic violence is a very tragic crime that traumatizes everyone. Now, where did domestic violence start? Domestic violence starts when one side in the relationship wants to be controlling and in the need of power over another. Some truly believe that they have to be the dominant one in the relationship. An abuser may have developed the idea that domestic violence is okay, which it is not, or they were abused themselves when they were younger. The abusers learn from the culture that they grew up in, and the social environment encouraged them to accept it. Here we have the cycle of violence. The cycle of violence can show you why domestic violence will never stop unless there is help. The cycle of violence starts before everything, known as the tension building phase, where the intimate partners are fighting for the need of dominance. The next phase will be the incident, where the abuse is happening, whether it is emotional or physical. Next phase would be the honeymoon phase, where the abuser will play mind games with the victim to make them think that it was not their fault, which leads the victim forgiving the abuser, and the cycle will start all over again. As for my theory perspective, I chose conflict and feminist theory. Conflict theory is the division of labor due to male dominance over women. The feminist theory is that men and women should be equal. The stereotyping of women being submissive in the kitchen type is no longer socially acceptable. Power and control play a big role in dominance because the other half will try to dominate the other by being manipulative. Being equal in a relationship is healthy and shows no signs of trying to have power or control. As for my concept, I chose gender inequality and patriarchy. The first sociological concept I will be focusing on is gender inequality. Dominance and inequality are the real issues of domestic violence. Women and men are unequal on so many levels. An example of gender inequality is masculinity, where males look and are physically stronger than females. Females are masked as weak and fragile. These ties into domestic violence because when males think that they are stronger than females, they can control them, especially by force. My second sociological concept is patriarchy. Patriarchy is where the idea of men having dominant jobs. Some examples of patriarchy is where males are in charge of a job or the superior. They believe that females are under them, belittling them. They believe that they are the moneymaker for the household, and therefore the male is the dominant one. As you can see, domestic violence will occur due to the male feeling as a superior over the female. Since the female is below the male, she should have no say and do what is told. Along these lines, there is still the stereotyping of the old social culture of the social structure for males and females. However, times have changed now and females are advancing. Again, this all pertains to domestic violence because it shows insight on reasons why males may be violent to females. What can we do to stop domestic violence? If victims are educated on domestic violence, they have a more likely chance to get help and mostly realize that they are not alone and that there is help for them. If more people were aware of domestic violence, people can help others who are in danger. Not only can victims get help, but the batterer as well. You can end up saving someone's life. On a social level, I think there should be more awareness campaigns about domestic violence. I rarely hear or see campaigns about domestic violence. They should fund more programs in Hawaii and have people professionally trained on how to deal with domestic violence victim calls. There is even at least one program on each island, which is good. Yes, it is harder because we are isolated and small compared to the States, but there is something, not nothing. With the past statistics, it goes to show that more programs and funding to domestic violence awareness programs need more help. Also, the Congress can make stricter laws about domestic violence cases. On a personal level, we should teach our children what is right and what is wrong, showing by example is a strong action because children learn more by watching. Sometimes confronting the victim can scare them or make them more to themselves. You have to be understanding, not judgmental, and ask them or let them know how much you care for them. You want to make them feel safe. Do not pressure them too much. There are many programs in Hawaii that offer help to domestic violence victims that you can volunteer for. It is a long process to be healed, so you should never just stop trying to support another person. Having a good attitude is key. Just talking to your friends about domestic violence will be a big help to get more people aware of domestic violence. You can ask to give a speech at school, your community center, workplace about domestic violence. Getting the information about domestic violence out there and letting people know that you're willing to help can increase the number of victims getting help. Summarizing my presentation, domestic violence is an abusive act to control another person. Domestic violence is misunderstood due to myths of why domestic violence started. Domestic violence affects everyone. It is important that people are aware of domestic violence and is educated because it can help reduce domestic violence in America. There are a lot of programs out there that can help victims and people who know victims. I hope that this will make more people aware of domestic violence and for the victims that they stand up for themselves or try to get help. Everyone needs to pitch in and start somewhere. I would like to thank you for your time and hope you learned something from my presentation. These are the sources that I used to conduct my research about domestic violence in America.